No, I knew what you're talking about. So, you guys all set? All right. Let me call to order the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency meeting for. We have a lot of echo in this. Does that feel echoey to you?
A little bit.
Yeah, Miranda, you may have to have them turn that down because it's.
Hello.
Very echoey. Call to order the meeting. We've done that. Pledge of Allegiance. You'll please rise. Mike, you want to lead us, please?
Right hand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call.
Chair Mulhart.
Here.
Director Craven.
Here.
Director Kelly.
Here.
Director Borchard.
Here.
Okay, I see Andy Waters is in the audience as an alternate, and I don't see any other alternates. If they come in, Miranda, you'll note them for the record, but Andy's on. Public comments, opportunity for the public to address GMA.
Agenda review.
Oh, I'm sorry. My mistake. Agenda review.
We have a request to move item number 5 up to the first informational item. The staff who did the audit contract is here to answer any questions you might have, and they have a conflict, a meeting conflict they'd like to get out of here as soon as possible.
Okay, so move it up to just before the informational items?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any objection to that?
Do we get a discount on the bill?
Yeah, she won't be here as long.
Okay, all right. So moved. Any other changes? Okay, agenda motion to accept agenda with the changes as
So
noted.
moved.
Second.
Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Public comments, opportunity for the public to address the board on non-agenda items. Yeah, Brian, did you see Dave came in? Nobody from the public? Okay, board member comments? Anybody? Any comments? Okay, let's go to,
Move the approval of the consent calendar.
okay, and one item is the minutes. A second?
Second.
Okay, any objection? Hearing none, so approved. All right, let's deal with the first action item, which is number 5.
Good afternoon, Chair Mulhart, board members, members of the audience, Gerhard Hubner, Watershed Protection District. I'll be presenting this item. This item is number 5. This is our fiscal year 2011-12 annual audit report. You do have the staff report in your packet today, as well as the final audit. I have a short presentation, if I can find a different group in here earlier, and I don't see the clicker advancement, so I would just ask that the next slide come up, please. Thank you. So as you know, this is a requirement of the California Government Code. It requires the county auditor and controller to perform annual audits for fiscal accounts for every special district, of which the GMA is one. The county auditor and controller has the discretion. Director.
When we had this discussion 8-9 months ago, you told us it wasn't annual. It was either 1 or 2 years. How come it's annual now?
Because the board decided at the
But
June.
that's not government code.
No, ma'am. It's
But apparently in the staff report, it's showing subsection 69909B.
So we did the right thing by
Yes.
choosing that.
It allows the governing body of a special district to request a biannual, governing every 2-year audit period. So there is provisions in there that allow
Okay.
that.
Okay.
As I understand it, we had some discussion
You
sometime
did.
back going to 1.
so let me. So we were
Okay.
meeting the government code. Next slide, please. So at your June meeting, 2011, we went from biannual to an annual audit. The agency sent out a request for qualified firms. They received 10, which 3 actually sent it out. They had 3 responses, of which Collins Accounting Company was ultimately chosen. They're the same firm that you had last year. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's just jump to the chase. In their opinion, the financial statements referred above present fairly in all material aspects of the agency's position as of June 30th, 2012. So this is the statement that you want to see in your audit report. Next slide, please. There were 2 findings in the report that they commented on. One was in regards to the irrigation efficiency, the exemption from penalties. This was their recommendation that the operators with potential surcharges be contacted soon after the deadline for irrigation efficiency filing so that the surcharges could be assessed if the operators do not qualify. They further recommended the board clarify whether the past policy of granting extensions of time to file irrigation efficiency would be continued. In our response, next slide please, we commented that our current workflow processes determined if there is failure to submit an irrigation efficiency application because we received them in the second half of the extraction data, typically in the February or April. And if we determine that surcharge is due, it's not been filed, we contact the operator. So this is board policy, this is past practices. We don't immediately go to the penalty. We contact them. There's a piece of paperwork not here, there. We don't immediately go to the assessment of a penalty or a surcharge. Next slide. So this could take several weeks, depending on our workflow or board-directed priorities. We believe it's been our experience that these resolve within several months. The fiscal impact of the agency, we believe, is very limited, and we don't rely on the revenue to support our core operations, and the penalties are recovered within the same fiscal year. Next slide, please. The second finding was our software. Their recommendation was that the capitalization of the software and the management prepared that they be adjusted with the journal entries, that the agency's operations be evaluated year in light of these new accounting standards to ensure that these are covered by the accounting standards. And our response was, we agree. Next slide. And with that, we will, in the future, report these according to the applicable accounting standards. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions. We do have Janice Turner, Director of Public Works Agency Fiscal Services, here to answer any questions you might have on the audit. It was conducted under their purview with our assistance.
Very good. Let me go around. Dave?
I'm just curious why the company we've selected is in Lincoln, California for this process.
I can't answer that.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Janice Turner. I'm with the Public Works Agency Central Service Division, or Department. And this firm happens to be in Lincoln, California. We go out on an RFP, and we send out the RFP to all known firms that have expressed an interest, and to ones that are local, and to also ones that are within the state. And this particular firm, their proposal was the lowest cost, and they were willing to travel down here and conduct the audit for the fee, which I believe was about $5,000.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions, Dave? Mike?
On the assessing the penalties for irrigation efficiency, implementing that, in the past, people are allowed to, well, you have to pump your year and then you're going to file. It seems to me the only way you could avoid the problem that they're alluding to is to require people to declare before they ever pump which way they're going to go. And I don't know that, I mean, that makes a structural change that bears some discussion before you implement it.
Correct.
Okay. Steve?
Yes, similar to the thing that, number one, I appreciate the fact that we have a positive report from the auditor overall, so compliments to everybody to make that happen. But the recommendation in terms of notification, I know that I agree we should contact them before we assess the penalty, but I'd like us to look into contacting them sooner when it hasn't come in. Let's get after it quicker in terms of the contact, so we don't wait till as long and have that become a colder trail.
Agreed.
Charlotte?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, the only comment I have is one of your recommendations, we recommend the operators would be contacted soon after the deadline. We had some discussion on that. And then further, you said, we further recommend that the Board of Directors clarify whether the past policy of granting extensions of time to file for irrigation efficiency will be continued. That's a board decision. It's not on the agenda. It needs to be agendized. And I think when you put that particular item on the agenda, you ought to put simultaneously with that the issue of some kind of metric to determine the time frame by which we start the follow-up process. So we have some record keeping of that so we can demonstrate that we're on top of it. And then the specific question that you have addressed here, you got to put on the agenda at some point.
Mr. Chairman, too, I think if we look back, this may be a lesser problem than what is alluded to here, because in the implementation of the new processes, there were some people trying to make decisions, and that may not be a recurring event, too.
Okay. All right, so those are the comments there. The last...
Chair, one more thing, too, I might mention. It seems to me we've discussed some of these callback implementation issues with other aspects of the ordinance, response to the metering requirement, other things. And I would just wonder if this has already been addressed.
Okay. Well, that's a good question. The other thing is maybe we, in the new protocol that we've established, this may be an issue for the operations committee to look at because it's an operational issue. So anything associated with this question or the timeliness of any other notification could be a whole package and so that we're consistent on how we handle whether it's meters or irrigation efficiency, and let's run it by the operations committee, and that'll be a task for them before you bring it to the board. Okay? Everybody okay with that direction? Anybody in the audience have any questions on this item? Okay. This is, as I see it, it is a receive and file.
Move to receive and file.
Okay.
Second.
Motion.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, hearing none, so moved. All right, very good. Thank you. All right, let's go back to item number 2, informational items. Robert? Oh, okay.
Kathleen Rydell, here to introduce the Las Posas Basin Las Posas Basin update. Staff attended the meeting this morning. This morning's meeting was the first meeting since the last FCGMA board meeting. Items of interest that were discussed this morning were the correspondence that was written from the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency dated March 15th. It was a response to an email we received. It opened the door for discussions on expanded use. And so that was a heated discussion. And then I would let Chairman Robert Iranio of the Las Posas Users Group
Okay.
provide
All right.
additional details.
All right, thanks, Kathleen.
Good afternoon, Chair. Robert Iranio, Crestview Mutual, and also Chairman of the Las Posas Basin Users Group. As Kathleen introduced and spoke about, our surprise of the day was a protracted discussion that went into expanded use in the Las Posas Basin and whether or not we're going to be able to get a handle on it. The particular interest or thing that's driving this and what caused us to jump up was we have seen agricultural interests have been putting in well permits in order to drill their own wells and move off the county waterworks system due to a price difference that it currently exists between them pumping their own water from their wells versus what the county's charging in order to deliver them water. The problem that we see with this and what came to light today is that when a agricultural interest has been on county waterworks district and receiving county water, when they drill their own well, any incremental amount of historical allocation that is within the county waterworks system is not moving back to the agricultural interest that just drilled the well. And it's being left in the county's pot for them to go ahead and continue using. So not only do you have an expanded use, that you have a new interest that is on ag efficiency and allowed to use as much water as they can efficiently, you're not moving the historical allocation that's over in this other pot. And so essentially we have double dipping that's going on. What's going to happen with this, I can't say at this point, but it did draw a lot of discussion, and my guess is that the interest that was drawn on this will continue to make this item come back around until we do tackle it and come up with some sort of an idea on how we're going to do it. Currently, I have 2 ideas on it that I'm going to be working with other staff members within the Las Posas Basin in order for us to put an idea together and approach the County Waterworks District. And we're not picking on them. It just happens to be that they're the only one where this circumstance could happen or is happening.
That's not true, and I didn't get a chance to talk to you, but I'll say more about that later.
In the Las Posas Basin? Okay, I stand corrected, and I look forward to talking with staff about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
It is clear that this problem could be a huge problem when you get into a case where allocation is not moved correctly. If that's in fact what we have to do and we wind up in a double dipping kind of scenario, it's not where we want to go. So I would encourage, as you go through members of the Las Posas Basin Users Group, that we make sure we pull in with the GMA folks so that we're not getting ahead of each other and then wind up delaying some decision down the road, because Jeff is just bouncing out of his seat right now when he hears this. So.
Mr. Chairman, if I might comment on it for a second. If any study we do in regard to that, I really would like to see us do it agency-wide if we could, because I see that coming on the OPUG also.
Yes.
You have water being furnished by United and then credits being left with people with inoperative wells, possibly.
Okay. Jeff.
To give your board some context, the letter was written to the GMA requesting that we do some accounting of sorts following the water around. Now, any transfer of allocations requires your board's approval. That's the way the ordinance is written. If I remember the circumstance of this particular case, there's a 30-acre farm, guy's going to drill his own well, pump on efficiency. He was told he could have his historical allocation back, but if he gets it back from the Waterworks District, they will not supply him the backup water. He's off the district. He's on his own. So it's not the case that the district wouldn't give it back. They just had conditions that were unacceptable to that particular person. There was a lot of discussion about who should be handling this problem, this whole idea of expanded use. And I pointed out to the group that was there this morning that this is the pimple on the backside of a dragon here as far as expanded use. They're bending over dollars to pick up pennies, arguing with a little issue like this. I agree it's an issue, and I agree it's an expansion of use, but they have bigger expanded use things they need to deal with. Well, when they talked about that, they said, characteristically, well, that is, as Dr. Kelly pointed out, a GMA-wide issue. Now, your board, when they embarked on this basin-specific planning, had hoped to, because they are a much more cohesive group, smaller group, they've worked well together, that they might be able to wrestle some of these tougher issues to the ground. The discussion ended with, well, this is a can of worms that we really can't get to right now. We're just going to push it on the things to-do list down in the future. So it's not likely that the expansion of use is going to be addressed anytime soon unless it's done at the GMA board level. And I did point out to them what a sticky wicket that would be and how we don't really have a way to account for the water. We know how much water comes out of a well that's metered, but we don't know how it's plumbed, where those wells, where that water gets distributed to, or any of that other stuff. We know that people have to come to your board to transfer an historical allocation. We know that in the case that they talked about, that the fellow who drilled the 30-acre well will be pumping on efficiency, will have a meter. He's supposed to report that, self-reporting, and he's also supposed to report any water he gets from the Waterworks District 1. Meanwhile, Waterworks District 1 is going to report all of their use. So we'll have some idea of how that impacted the basin. Waterworks District 1 was also careful to point out that they don't use the entire historical allocation every year. And this, I don't remember what this was, but I think the number was 20 acre feet, something like that. Wasn't even, they probably have more than that left over of their historical allocation, even had they given it away. So it was, there were a lot of moving parts that nobody was able to address. And a question was asked, which I want to answer now officially in front of your board and to everybody involved with Las Posas Basin, has this happened before? And I said, I really don't know. But we have examples of it, and one that was very nearby was Del Norte and the DeBoni ranches, where the Bonis had a historical allocation, joined Del Norte and gave it up, and then Del Norte wouldn't give it back when DeBoni went to pumping. So it's happened in other places, and if it's happened there, I expect it's happened all over the GMA, so it may be a bigger issue.
as I said, this issue, it probably very well will be a district-wide issue, and it's a complicated issue. We're going to have to deal with it as a result of the GREAT program, with water delivered on the GREAT program, and to make sure that folks that are taking great water in lieu of pumping are not getting double dipping and the credits that Mike refers to. So I'm well aware that the complexity of this thing could mushroom very quickly. And I'm also aware that it's important for the Las Posas group to move the ball down the road, but if this is one of those, on the surface appears to be a small issue, but behind it is a really big issue that will derail your process, because it'll always come up as, how do we deal with this issue? It will be the elephant in the room. We have this problem on the Oxnard Plain, and my hope is that at some point we'll get the OPUG group again together as we bring the GREAT program agreement that we'll probably see as a board next month, that the United Board has essentially signed off on once the final details are done, and all the cities and other entities, PV and others, will sign off either later this month or early next month. So that ball is moving down the road. With regards to this issue, one of the things we did, going back, one of the things we did on the GREAT program is we got, in my opinion, at the GMA, behind the issue because other folks moved the ball way down the road. We made a big squeak at United and the GMA. We've now caught up with everybody, and as you recall, we made it a #1 priority, and it is, in fact, moving down the road. I guess what I would ask is that from the group that you're dealing with, and they are the folks that are going to have to use the water, and the issues that Jeff has raised, and as you know, Jeff's been attending the meetings, I think it might be helpful that we come up with a matrix of when is this issue going to be dealt with, what are the resources we have to put in place to get it dealt with. I don't want this issue to derail what you're doing, and I don't want this issue swept under the carpet, on the other hand, and have you guys come to an agreement and then the GMA staff raising a flag saying we never really have dealt with a very fundamental underlying issue, and then we get disconnect again on where you guys are and where the GMA is.
Understood.
That's what I'm trying to avoid. How we do that, I don't know. You know what you can do at the LPUG group and the protocol there. Jeff knows what he can do in terms of the GMA staffing time and the like. And I think that one of the first things that we need to do is create a decision matrix time frame, so that we all know what we're running to and what the decisions have to be made. It may well be that this issue will not be resolved at the LPUG group, and it may have to be resolved at the GMA board level. And I don't want the board to be behind in the process, but to know that this decision is coming along. Does that, do you understand?
Yeah, I do. And a suggestion would be, one of the first issues of order, it would seem to me, and I suggested this to them, is that when we embarked on this basin-specific planning, I think it was your board's conclusion that you could have special case situations in special basins. In other words, all the basins weren't the same. You might have different rules. So a threshold question would be, if the Las Posas users group chose to deal with that issue of expansion of use in a certain way that might not be the way you could deal with it in Pleasant Valley or GREAT, would that be okay to the GMA? And so that's a threshold question they needed to ask themselves. I suggested as much, and I asked them whether or not they wanted us to raise it with your board. So that would be a first order of work, and one of the first things you want to put in the matrix.
Go ahead, Bob.
As I understand it, is that there's a hope that the Las Posas Basin would become a template. And in order for that to happen, we have to take a look at some issues and try and deal with them within our basin and kick the can around to come up with some ideas as to what can work in our basin. And if they're able to be brought out and used in other basins, fantastic. But as Jeff said, I'm not sure that all of our issues will translate to all the other basins. I think, and perhaps I'm being optimistic, that there is an answer for us in our basin with our pumpers and with our group that we can deal with this issue. I agree with Jeff's assessment that while we're talking about this one particular part of expanded use, I think that's a relatively easy one in order for us to get our hands on and be able to get that one off to the side and be able to move forward, knowing that there's other expanded use issues that have to be dealt with that are going to be far more complicated.
Then,
And that's my hope.
All right, let's do it this way. This is an informational item, so it's difficult, and I'm not going to let the board get into a discussion of how to solve the specific problem. I'd rather have the discussion at the board level of what do we need so that we can get it on the agenda correctly and then deal with the issue. So with that in mind, it may be that in this issue of the Las Posas, we as an informational item, we get the Las Posas update. We can get that at every meeting. We're doing it at every meeting. I would suggest at the next meeting as an action item that the issue that Jeff just raised, that you just raised, some discussion at the board level clarifying how do we want one size fits all? Are we going to permit different solutions in different basins as part of a grand system in that basin, and that's why it can be different in that basin. Therefore, it does give you the ability to craft a solution and answers Jeff's question. And if that's one of the governing issues that will help solve your problem, then it needs to be on the agenda for the next meeting as an item. You guys need to work out the details, and if between now and then it requires some kind of committee discussion, because we've set up that process, then it needs to be assigned to whatever the appropriate committee needs to be, whether it's operations or finance or executive.
Understood.
And I would submit then that if we use that particular model here at the GMA to solve these problems, that is, you folks start working through your issue. Staff raises a question that requires the board to think about, and if that item needs to get clarification so you can move your decision matrix further down the road, then that item needs to be on the agenda. And it may be then that we have to have both a Lost Poston Basin update portion under the information item and then an action item almost on every agenda that deals with Lost Poston Basin decisions. And I would ask that those decisions be relatively narrow. I don't want a laundry list of 10 of these decisions. I'd like them to come up in sequence so that the next decision is logically in sequence. And that's what I'm referring to as some kind of matrix. My intent would be to send a clear signal to the Las Posas area and to all the pumpers that we're going to deal with the tough issues. We're going to deal with them in sequence. They have to come before the board in the right format. And when they are unique to a specific area as part of a specific overall plan in that area, then it makes logical sense for us to do that if that's what the board's direction is, so that you're not chasing without a guidance and we're not having to make massive decisions, but we're doing it piecemeal.
Okay.
That's kind of my direction. With that, I'll let Mike wants to speak, and I know you want to speak.
Chair, if I could just
Yeah.
interject. I understand your concept there, and I think I agree with it. But I think I would suggest, I try to go to these meetings. I was at the one today, and it seems a bit premature to request an action item in next month's meeting. The group is still working conceptually through the concept, and I think we ought to give it some time, let it kind of gel. And my fear is that it derails the basin plan project that's ongoing right now. They're getting to a point where they're going to, I think, come up with a final on that, and I see this topic as potentially derailing that thing, and kind of just let's let it come forward a little bit.
Then if taking Dave's suggestion, the direction then I would propose is that you don't have to put it on every month's agenda, but when a decision comes up and you reach a point needs clarification from the board, it's reached a point where the board has to make a clarification decision. That item needs to get on the agenda, and before it gets on the agenda, it needs to go through some committee process so we can have, and that's the whole purpose of the committee process, to give it a dry run.
Okay.
What I don't want to see is that 4 or 5 decisions come rolling to us 4 months down the road, and then we bog down in a 5-hour meeting and we only get 2 or 3 of them, and then the whole thing is derailed.
But that's draft 2.
Oh, yes, sorry. Let me turn to Steve before the...
I have a question, and then I would like to respond to these comments. And when I was on Fox Canyon, and I was off for 2 years, and then I'm back, this issue of the Las Posas Basin and trying to develop this basin-specific plan was out there. Have we funded the Las Posas Basin? Has Fox Canyon given some money for any of these activities by the Las Posas Basin?
Not for Las Posas, other than staff time.
Right, okay. My understanding was back then there was going to be a Las Posas Basin plan that was going to come back. And so one of the concerns I have is that here I am 2 years later coming back and we still don't have Las Posas. And it doesn't feel like we're really very close on a Las Posas Basin plan, and you may have something different, but in terms of, I haven't heard how they're addressing these hard issues that we say we have to address, from credits and all these other things, and all of that was going to be done. Now, maybe that's out there. If it is, it hasn't been something that I've been able to glean in terms of that. So now, in response to the comments that you made, I like your idea. And I actually like the idea of it being every month, but at a minimum, I think that we have hard issues we have to deal with. And anytime an agency, an organization, lots of different stakeholders have hard issues, the easiest thing to do is to kick the can down the road. I mean, that's just human nature, and I think we have to recognize that at this point in time. And I think that it's important for us to say we have to stop. We are at the point where we have to get a handle on the basin overall and start to say, and that's why I think we were attracted to the Las Posas Basin user group, because we thought they could deal with the hard issues at a specific level with an identified group of stakeholders, and people would be there, and you could really bring common sense, and you wouldn't have the such a big agency dealing with that. That was the hope, but I think instead it just shows us how hard the issues are, that it's still difficult to get those addressed as it goes forward. So this is not an action item. This is just how would we propose to have other items come back. From my own standpoint, I want us to start regularly finding out where is the plan, the Las Posas plan, and where are they on these major issues? Are they just going to not deal with these and only deal with this one, or whatever? That being said, this is, in my mind, an example of an issue that could distract us from the big question of what is the Las Posas Users Group plan for the basin. Should we have a separate plan for Las Posas or not? Well, that's a function of, let's see the plan. Are there some things that are unique to Las Posas that mean we should do this at a basin by basin level? Or should we, maybe this is so hard we should only do this at the Fox Canyon level?
Let me, Mike, before I jump in, I think in fairness, as you said, you have been gone for the 2 years. Let me, in fairness, the Las Posas Basin Users Group did produce a plan, and it was a very extensive plan, and they presented it at the GMA. And at the GMA, staff raised, I probably was the most vocal about it. I raised a number of issues that I didn't think it was an adequate plan. But in terms of actually producing a plan, they did produce a plan. In my personal opinion, it was not acceptable for a variety of reasons, and I'm not going to go through all the reasons. And staff had a variety of reasons. And we basically sent it back to the Las Posas Users Group, and they have re-energized and reconstituted the way they're doing Bob's position as chair of the users group was created out of some of those issues, and they are redrafting major portions of that. One of the reasons it was kicked back, one of the reasons I rejected the plan, and after having thought through it a lot, was because it didn't deal with some of the specific issues that staff had raised. So I'm not saying that the plan was perfect, because if the plan was perfect, we'd adopted the plan, but it wasn't perfect. But they, in fact, did produce a plan that they thought was adequate, and we have now kicked it back. What we're going through now are the specifics within that plan to try to bring it up to a level that's fills in some of the holes that staff has raised and the like. So we didn't reach the full plan, but we did produce something that is now in the second or third iteration of that plan. So that's kind of where we are. So with that,
I'd also like to clarify one of the points you brought up, that it appears that some of these difficult issues we might be kicking the can down the road. I would like to point out also that no one's getting compensated for this. This is a group of stakeholders that are donating their time. We don't have outside consultants that are putting time on this. It's being drafted at the very generous offer of Callegas in order to put staff time towards it. But even that, we have about a half a man day, half a man person that's actually our architect, and that's been whittled back as other things have come up. So while it seems like we're kicking things down the road, the simple matter is we're trying to figure out a prioritization for all the myriad of issues and where they fall within that, and how we can manage our extremely humble resources in order to try and get these issues out there, get them discussed, and get the draft or reiteration of that draft back in front of you again for evaluation. For lack of a better word, it's just simply we don't have enough resources in order to address all the issues in their complexity in enough hours of the day, with the group being the fact that everyone's volunteering to come together and meet on a regular basis. For the amount of work that we've been able to put out, the issues that we have talked about, I'm extremely proud of the group and being able to stay together and bring these to the surface. But it's going to be a long process with the design and how the stakeholders are addressing it, and the resources we have with essentially no budget in order to work our way through this. And those are just simple restrictions that we have to deal with and continue to work within.
Well, if I could, Bob, I appreciate you saying that. That's why I started my comments with the question to staff, are we putting any money into this? Because that is exactly what I was thinking, and that is, I know all these stakeholders are coming, and it's sort of like, hey, we need to plan. And when I say kicking it down the road, that's just human nature, and this is a tendency for organizations to do that. So one of the fundamental questions that we can't answer today because it's not agendized is, do we need resources? Quite frankly, when I was here 2 years ago, I thought it was Callegas was interested enough in this that they were going to put the resources in necessary for the plan to move forward. So if those resources are insufficient for us to move forward, that's a fundamental question that is a fair question to bring up and raise, and we have to try to address that. So I appreciate the volunteer work, but I also appreciate that we need to. We don't want to be here. When you talked about 4 or 5 months from now having 5 hard issues come to us, I hope we have something 4 or 5 months from now that addresses hard issues, whether one way or the other. And if we need more resources to help, that certainly would be something that I personally would be supportive of, but I know we can't have that conversation here, so thank you.
Mike.
Yeah, I just would comment, in my opinion, and I try to not be an active participant, but an attendee at all their meetings. And I really thought they were further along than Chairman Mulhart felt they were. The problem you have is if you have some issues which are more universal, I don't see that a select group trying to define the problems in their specific area should have to completely solve every issue which is agency-wide. That should fall back to the agency. But lacking a complete and total finished product that answered every question that could be answered, it was somewhat rejected by staff, and therefore I felt it was not as appropriate rejection as Chairman Mulhart feels it was. Secondly, I would like to bring another point, and that is that this allocation issue, as I think of it, is certainly has an effect agency-wide wherever there are dual purveyors. And here with United, you had people with their own well, and they switch over to United with the pipeline project and stuff that you have. You're just seeing the opposite direction in Somas, where, or Las Posas rather, where you've had people on county water when it was Las Posas water. It got acquired. I was at the meeting the night that the county decided to acquire the Las Posas Water Company. All sorts of claims were made that night, which were totally false, saying that they were going to solve all the problems in the Las Posas by just selling a lot more water. Well, it sounded pretty fishy at the time. But it was the agency, Jeff's predecessors, who did that. So there was a lie made there. The fact is that they went on, and then they have their problem, and then they look to raise more money. But we have people who are the fee structure in the county has gotten such because the county's seen fit to, in spite of what the cost of their production is, they've seen fit to raise their fees to equal the competitors in the M&I area. I would suggest that once the structure, the facilities were in the ground, their cost of production did not go up to equal other purveyors. I can't believe that Reddy's electric bill tripled. To that extent, though, the rates have gone up significantly, and we have people now going to other sources of water. And so you have the opposite thing happening, but very similar, in the Plains versus Las Posas. And so I think why I say that the problem should be maybe looked at more universally is that I think there's a certain amount of things that have happened over here where people have idled their wells and stuff and maybe gone on and collected credits when they weren't really, they were getting water from other sources. The same thing there, though, we have people who switch off of county and go, or maybe they retain the county meter as a standby meter for a second source, but the county continues to hold those credits, if you would, or allocation is more appropriate. So to ask Las Posas to solve every problem, I think is an inappropriate assignment.
All right, let's see if we can wrap this up, because we're trying to give some direction here. First of all, obviously, you're going to have to deal with this issue at the Las Posas area, the Las Posas Users Group. Jeff has raised a number of issues. Mike has raised issues. Others have raised issues. Is this a universal issue? Is it an isolated issue? If we agree to it and in one area, does it set precedent that now becomes a controlling factor in other areas? I believe that that's a policy decision of the board. And I believe that that policy decision can be made even though we're not tackling the fundamental underlying position of how to deal with the transfer between District 1 into an individual pumper, which is what you folks up there right now are trying to work out. The question then is, if you come up with a solution, who does that solution apply to? Just the Las Posas Group? To everybody in the future? Is it precedent setting or not? I think that's a question that the board needs to tackle. And it may be those kinds of questions, which really are policy questions that are broad in their scope rather than specific in a particular basin, that we ought to deal with, and they ought to be on the agenda. So you could, in fact, have an agenda item dealing with, and it may not be listed as Las Posas user issues, but it could be generalized policy questions that the board needs to resolve that are guidance for any basin that we're dealing in the area, and it's guidance for the staff as well as you folks. And so we will meet Dave's criteria that we're not trying to interfere with your specific solution until it's done and not put a dilemma in front of you. It deals with Mike's issue that it's not fair to put the burden of the world on your shoulders, and it solves the question that Jeff has raised. where am I as the agency executive officer and the agency, where are we going to take this decision and how do we apply it in the future? I think that's an issue that could be put on next month's agenda. And I think those are some of the issues that have to be resolved so that we don't kick the can down the road and we keep moving the ball down the road. And that's what I would propose.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, last comment, I really want to thank Jeff Pratt for coming. I think that these kind of things are going to happen less frequently with Jeff there and it all kind of getting talked out. So some of the universal issues can get resolved better having more parties sitting there. So his attendance at the meetings, I think, is very helpful, and I thank him for doing it.
Okay. So in terms of this matrix, I think it'd be helpful, and it's not something you have to share with the board at this stage or short term, but it's something that ought to be worked out. There ought to be, you folks need to work out the solution to how you're going to deal with this problem in the area. Jeff needs to put on the agenda a more universal decision, figure out which committee you want to run that by and some suggestions. You folks will attend that and hear what we're thinking and what we may or may not recommend to the board. And therefore, we're both doing our jobs moving this thing down the road. Anybody in the audience want to speak to this discussion? Thanks, Bob. David.
David attends every meeting also.
Thank you, Lynn, members of the board, staff. As a member who comes to or tries to make the meetings, I think it is a challenging group of questions that we're working on, and I don't want there to be a perception that we are kicking the can down the road. There is a lot of discussion with regards to chicken and egg, and trying to ferret through the decision-making process of what the appropriate body is. There was a lot of that today going on. Is this the appropriate issue, or is this not that this body be looking at? Should it be GMA talking about it? Should we? So I know it's. I think the complexity of the issue really is something that's coming to fore, and so I don't want there to be this perception that we're continually kicking the can down the road. And as well, I do want to repeat Dr. Kelly's comments. I do think it's very important having staff there, having Jeff there today. Really does help clear the air quickly because you can get direct feedback, so to speak, from him with regard to an issue, and that really helps move stuff down the road.
Okay,
So,
very good.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else? Okay. We were on a roll, and that was the informational item.
I just want to repeat one more time. Let's not get carried away demanding action just yet. This group is action-oriented, and they are working through this stuff. Let's give it a little bit of time to come forward. And you know, let's, if you want, put a time on it, you know, in September or something, or August. Make a time, but let's not get on a train of demanding action reports and thinking that we're helping the situation by pushing, because
Okay.
this group is already pretty self-motivated.
Okay. All right. Let's do item number 3. Receive and file a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any objection? So moved. Rick.
Yep, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Mulhart, directors. For the record, my name is Rick Virgutz. I'll be presenting item number 3 today. Status update on the FCGMA semi-annual extraction statement non-reporters. In April, we briefed your board on the results of the 2011-2 semi-annual statement filings. So it was a year ago. And at that point, we said there was a 20% failure rate to return the semi-annual statements. And that represented hundreds of wells. At that time, your board told us, clearly that's unacceptable. We need to work harder to get the non-reporters to submit the reporting and the payment on time. In May, the board adopted Resolution 2012-3, which sets a $500 civil penalty for failure to report extractions or to pay, and that remains in effect today. June through August of 2012, staff efforts were diverted a little bit as we focused on the 2012-1 mail out and retrieval and processing of that information. So that's just part of our routine semi-annual work that we do.
Excuse me, Rick.
Yes.
Clarify for me, because I always get mixed up. But the 2012-1 period is what monthly period?
12-1, that gets mailed out in July, and
That covers January to, or I should
that would,
say,
that's right. That would cover the first 6 months of the calendar year.
okay.
And then the paperwork gets mailed out, July 1 or the first week of July, so right after the end of June. And then there's typically about a 2-month period, maybe 2.5-month period where we're receiving paperwork, keying it into the computer system.
So that's where I get confused, because it seems we start to hear about the non-reporting issues about the end of the next period. And so that's where it gets mixed up on my mind, I think.
Okay. Well,
Go ahead.
let me go
Interrupted
through
your
and then
presentation. Go ahead and finish your
yeah.
presentation.
But
'Cause that's
you're
not-
right. There is a little bit of a delay there. You're right. Okay. So September through October of 12, your staff spent significant time following up with the non-reporter issue. About 44% of Jessica's time, which, by the way, Jessica's done the lion's share of the follow-up on this effort, so I've got to hand it to her. And I'm glad she's here today in case your board has any specific questions about what she's hearing. But what Jessica did, we placed phone calls, emails, faxes, trying to contact the operators that didn't file the paperwork. When that didn't work, we sent certified letters. 6 were returned as non-deliverable, 12 were signed for, but no follow-up, and 3 operators did contact us. So a huge amount of detective work going into that effort. November, our clerk, Jessica, spent about 30% of her time working on it, and in November we briefed the operations committee. At that point, we briefed the committee that we were now focusing as well on the 2012-1 non-reporters, which represented a 29% failure rate. So now we're grappling with 2 semi-annual periods trying to get the reporting straightened out. This is what we're hearing. Typical responses: we never got the paperwork from the agency. We take that opportunity to talk to the operator and say, well, here's what we have, what do you have? Oftentimes our contact information matches. We hear we sent it in, but we'll look for it, we'll resend it. Basically a number of reasons and excuses. You can read them on the slide there, but corporate office was supposed to do it. The person who used to do that doesn't work here anymore. Okay. Or we already reported to United. We didn't know we have to report to the GMA. So that's sort of a short list of some of the most typical responses we get from the non-reporting operators when we talk to them.
Let me, if I may, we have in front of us the report, and you do a lengthy analysis of the percentages and the failures, and painting a picture of frustration. I get that. And I read through the summary, and then down at the recommendation, provide feedback to staff and receive and file a report. Let me see if I can move the question to, we recognize we have a problem. It's an ongoing problem. What is staff, I'm not looking for a solution, but I'm first turning to the folks that have to deal with this problem. What are you proposing as a possible solution or fix, or how do we solve this? Or do we send this, the last operations committee was in November of last year. Do we take and assign this very difficult, complex, frustrating process again to the operations committee? Give the board some guidance of what do you want from us today?
Well, thank you. Today we're, as you know, it's an information item, but one of the ideas is that for this group with 2011-1, or excuse me, 2011-2 and 2012-1, we've exhausted efforts trying to reach the operators, so we think maybe now is a good time, as good a time as any, to start contacting the landowners. The GMA ordinance code says that if the operator doesn't comply with the reporting, the agency can talk to the landowner. So that may be the best way to work out the final details to get the final reporting in on this group of roughly 69 operators.
Okay, let me do that, Mike. You guys dealt with this issue back in November. It's going to be a recurring theme going forward. We need to come up with either a protocol that it's an ongoing task of the operations committee to work with staff. They're raising the issue of, do we now reach out to the landowners in their summary? They talk about that's considerable effort and expense. Rather than trying to solve the problem today, here and now, do we just say, Mike, you need to take this on at the operations committee again? What do you want to do?
Well, we did look at it. Supervisor Zaragoza and I looked at it, and the issue was some of these people are just, you're not actually ever getting contact with them. Is that not true?
We don't know.
But that's where the boots on the ground person was going to be, because, are they hiding? Are they non-existent? What is the truth? Unfortunately, that process has gotten stumbled by our lack of council agreement that we can knock on their door and barge on through. So I think that some of it waits for that resolution to occur, because really, calling them on the phone has been not helpful. Sending them certified letters hasn't helped. Perhaps they don't exist, these people we're looking for, but they probably do exist, and then we need to find them. The ones that can be reached, that's a different category. And our opinion was that the staff should go ahead and aggressively post whatever penalties are appropriate and already legislated and get on with it.
Well, what I would propose then is that this is a information item. It is an ongoing problem. Have you guys had an operations committee this year at all?
Just in February.
And this issue wasn't on that item, right? My proposal, unless you guys have a different take on it, my proposal is that this needs to be on an operations committee agenda whenever you folks decide you want to do that, and make some specific recommendations to staff. And it may be what you're proposing there. It may be that we have to get some methodology of having people knock on doors, how we do that, given some of the concerns that other people have raised. I don't know the answer to it, and it's going to take a lengthy amount of time and energy to give staff some guidance, and I'm not sure we have the time today to do it, and one, it's not an action item. So as an information item, you're looking for feedback. My feedback would be we need to move it to the operations committee, and then out of that it can go back on the agenda, or I don't know.
I'm going to, being on the operations committee, at least currently, I'd just offer something a little bit different than that. Number one, it's interesting when it says provide feedback to staff. I mean, is it an action item or isn't it an action item?
Okay.
I mean, whatever feedback is.
It's called kicking the can.
But my feedback is really there's just one thing that staff is really asking us, and that is, can we contact the parcel owners?
Yes. Okay.
I think so.
That's not something that needs to go all the way back and be delayed and go to the operations committee and everything else. My feedback is that's perfectly appropriate. I mean, if we've made good faith efforts over and over again, the property owner is ultimately the one responsible for these fines. They should know somebody's incurring fines on your behalf. And I think you'll probably see a significant change in compliance. And, the parcel owner may be able to help unravel some of these mysteries. So my feedback is just real simple. The staff is saying, hey, that's what their recommendation that they mentioned over and over again is in here.
So your opinion that was to go past whoever the listed operator is and go to the tax roll and see who in the hell is paying the tax.
And send them,
I agree.
Staff will find the appropriate way, but do whatever's appropriate to get their attention, so they'll help get the attention.
Because some of the things they're running to as being involved with the farm community and in a service portion of our pest control operation, you have people die, their kids get it, the attorney gets the bill, he throws it in the trash. and it's sometimes kind of fun chasing them. And then frequently they're out of town or out of country even. So, from the standpoint, who I'm talking about, we fight that battle on a personal level, and I see the same thing here. So going to the tax roll is a good answer.
Okay.
Chair, let me just also add,
Wait,
before we
hold-
reinvent the wheel, I think we've already dealt with this.
Yeah.
I think we already put procedures in place a few meetings ago about new penalties and time frames about when letters are supposed to be sent out, and then subsequent actions after that. I think
Okay.
that dealt with not only non-reporters, but also the failure to calibrate meters.
All right, let me ask Al. We're having a lot of discussion here about telling staff they already have the authority to do whatever they have to do, and it's an informational item.
It's more than an informational item.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
provide
You got to walk us through this.
Agendized.
Have they heard what we talked about, and then we just shut up? Now we're done. Give me some guidance here.
Well, Director Bennett is correct. It's not truly an informational item. It is asking for feedback from your board, which could include direction in terms of what, if any, further enforcement is appropriate given the non-reporting that's being described.
Just to help, at the Board of Supervisors level, provide feedback would even include a motion of the board. It's just, you don't have a recommended action, but it could still be a motion of the board to say, hey, you want feedback, as long as it is feedback to staff, this is the sense of the board. Otherwise, you could have 5 people give 5 different pieces of feedback, and the staff would still lack sort of direction.
Okay.
I might add, in the future, we may agendize this by saying provide direction to staff. Then it's more specific. We are allowed to come up with direction. Feedback is pretty close to the same, but feedback's got a little bit different connotation.
My observation is, I think staff has heard the discussion, and we've gotten the information, we've had a dialogue with staff, and there's nothing in the discussion that says they shouldn't go to the next step, and they have the authority to go to the next step. So do we need to do anything more so that we don't cross this magical line that we're all trying to stay out of? You got to tell us. What do you want us to do here?
At this point, my sense is that it's clear to staff what the board's position on this overall issue is. I don't see the need for a specific directive.
Okay. All right.
Move to receive and file.
Can I ask one question?
I second the motion.
Does staff feel that they have the authority to go to the property owners right now? Or does staff feel, or is staff asking this question because you don't?
We
You
do.
Okay, great.
Okay, I have a motion to receive and file. I have a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, hearing none, so moved. All right, let's go to item number 4. All right.
Chair Mulhart, board members, Gerhard Hubner again. This is item number 4. If you could bring the presentation up. I actually have a presentation. You do have the materials in front of you. The presentation follows the staff report as well as the information in the large spreadsheet. I can do the presentation if you like, or I could be just available for questions.
Well, let me do it, if I may. Let me do it this way. Dave, this was before the Finance Committee, and you're the chair of the Finance Committee. What would you like to talk about?
Well, I'd kind of like to hear the presentation, because
Okay.
we in finishing up, the committee kind of gave some guidance as to kind of a sense of priorities for the budget that we're interested in seeing, and I'd kind of like to see where that is headed.
Okay, there's your answer.
Okay, very good. So in today's presentation, I will be doing a highlight of the budget development process for this fiscal year, which is the 13-14 fiscal year. You'll have some budget numbers as well as the proposed annual work plan, which work in conjunction with each other. So let's start with some of the revenue assumptions. Start on the revenue. You start with the premise that we are starting with the 4 acre-feet pump charge. That remains unchanged in this proposed budget. This then is calculated with the number of acre feet. We propose to use a conservative number of 125,000 acre feet per year, which is the average of the last 5 years. Actually, the last 5 years you can see is 129,476, so we have a number slightly below that. Interest remains unchanged at $15,000, and surcharge penalties are proposed at $625,000. This represents the last of the Howling Nursery settlement of $250,000, plus what we believe will be surcharge payments of approximately $375,000. Again, these are estimates. At least the last one is an estimate. These are some of the preliminary budget numbers in terms of the starting balance. Approximately $2.7 million. Anticipated revenues of $1.1 million. Total funds available to your agency of $3.8 million. And total operating expenditures with contingency of $1,294,597. You also have in your spreadsheet, as you'll note, some of the planning level projections going out. Again, these all go to the assumptions. These assumptions, as you change them, will change the projections. So you'll see we put in $4 as the pump charge remains unchanged. We use the same number for the amount of extraction, 125,000 acre feet per year. We do project out no or minimal surcharges. We think with some of the things that we see out there, perhaps with Howling Nursery, which is our biggest surcharge payer, that will probably go away once the GREAT project kicks in. So we projected 0 out in the out years. Again, bare bones budget moving forward, no staff changes, expenses, or big changes. So take this last bullet as with a grain of salt. You can project it out, and it shows that our fund balance would go out 8 years. However, if any of these assumptions change, any big ticket items, increase the staff, or you fund something very large, of course, that fund balance will be much less in the number of years. So let's look at some of the proposed budget changes for the fiscal year. These are some of the feedback we got either from you, the board, the public, or at one of our fiscal committee meetings. We did remove the $100,000 working line, capital line from the spreadsheet. Folks felt that that was redundant with the contingency. We did separate out the fixed public works CSD charges from the regular public works lines. Actually, that has been done. That slide is old in terms of that remark. We had a long discussion about the blended rate. We've landed on the $90 an hour blended rate when you're looking at the staff charges, the calculation of the public works charges. Looking at our large expense carryovers, there's several that do carry over. For our groundwater supply and enhancement grant program, approximately $200,000 will still be carried over into the next fiscal year. This has been approved by your board, but we don't anticipate receiving those invoices till after the books close on the fiscal year. We have some remaining money still with Cal Poly and Dr. Stiles. That's about $20,000. We have the $80,000 in the well inspection contract if and when that gets released. Looking forward to some of the major items, I've segregated out into 3 different categories here. We have some new expenses anticipated. We have our Prop 84 planning match grant. If you recall, that was an action item that your board approved last month. We have the file digitization effort that we've carried over from the previous year. And we have some IT enhancements that we believe will help us with some of the program enhancements. We have some decreasing...
Gerhard,
yes.
Remind me the Prop 84 grant matches for what?
That's the project that we have in conjunction with Cayugas. That's the feasibility study, the delivery of...
Oh, yes.
Infrastructure. Some decreased expenses. We expect our weather station contract to expire, or we will let that contract expire at the end of the fiscal year. with the new purchase of the new weather station and our new weather station program. We do have our IT maintenance. We think that's going down. It's probably, I don't know if that's a $9,000 reduction, but I think it's going from 12 to 9. We have some placeholders, as we've had in past years, again, budgeting purposes, but perhaps not going to be expended. That would be the consultant contracts, our outside legal counsel, and then we have our $100,000 set aside for contingency.
Question, Gerhard?
Yes.
Maybe Mr. Vergoots. There were some expenses going to be needed to get our weather station going so that we could be rid of the contract. Were those spent, and is it ready?
They have, short answer, yes, those were recently spent. As a matter of fact, the equipment for the weather station arrived today. And we also have a contract with an outfit out of Chico called Western Weather Group to handle the cellular data plan for the station. And we have an agreement with DWR that they'll get it installed within the next few weeks. So we're working with them to hold their feet to the fire with that.
So this will result in a savings then?
Well, and if I could back up, yes, it will result in a savings. The assumption is that we don't reapprove the contract with Investment Signals.
We don't need them, I promise.
Okay. Moving now to our annual work plan and the task organization. This is similar to what we've done in the past years, where in our core tasks we have our admin, budget, and fiscal. We have a section for records. We have a section for technical services and legal as well. We have our section 2, which is our additional work tasks. Many of these are carryover from the last year. The agency flow and well inspection program, our groundwater management update. We have strategic public outreach, our basin boundaries, and then lastly, we have the digitization of our files. Some of the changes that we incorporated, similar to the budget worksheets, this is some of the comments either we received or internally we've looked at and made some adjustments. We've moved the non-reporting section, which you just had your update on. The compliance to core records, as you heard, is an ongoing item. It's going to continue, and we believe it's appropriate in the core records. We've moved the Las Postas Sub-Basin Management Plan. As you recall, that was on the additional task. It's not going away. In fact, probably a higher level of effort than ever. So we've moved that to the core technical. We've moved the remaining GSAP and the Prop 84 grant to core technical under our grant administration. That just seemed to make sense. GSAP will be phasing out, but being replaced by the Prop 84 grant. And then added our executive, fiscal, and operations to reflect the creation of those committees. Some of the work status changes for the fiscal year. Decrease on the online database. We feel we've overcome many of those issues. It occasionally comes up, but we feel that that's fairly, for the most part, behind us. Irrigation allowance index program, again, that will continue, but will not take the level of effort it has in the past years, as well as budget preparation and reporting. I've assumed some of those tasks, and I think there's some cost savings there. Non-reporting, that will continue. We still think that will be a significant effort, as you heard, to get the last of those resolved, as well as meter calibration. And we believe there'll be an increase in basin-specific planning and water supply project reviews, such as the GREAT program, as well as the City of Camarillo's desalter. I've just put this up here. We're not proposing at this time increase in staffing. You can see on the left is our current staffing, and then the positions that we have. On the right is proposed. We have a vacancy currently. We would use that vacancy as an opportunity, looking for a realignment. I'll get to that in a moment in terms of where we might be with that. Some of the challenges that we feel, we talked about this at the fiscal committee quite at length. We still believe we have insufficient technical staff for the remaining additional work tasks that we have. Some of the agency staffing is more oriented towards accounting records and less towards technical policy. We do spend a lot of time, as you've heard, meter calibration, the non-reporters, in the past, unregistered wells. So there is an opportunity now with our vacancy to perhaps use either an admin person and replace that, or perhaps a technical position, for example, using the water resource specialist classification in the county system. This is a table. Perhaps I won't go through this one. This just is a summary of all the numbers put on one slide. Again, your starting balance, what the revenues will be, where the work plan and public work services come in, and the expenditures. So this is really just a compilation of all the budget numbers in one place. We did meet. We've met internally. Actually, I'm pretty proud to say we're in pretty good shape in terms of our budget development. We're actually ahead of the game this year. We've had 3 internal budget development meetings with the staff. We did meet with the fiscal committee on March 22nd. They did review the spreadsheet and the work plan at length. As you heard, there was quite a bit of discussion about staffing levels, the type of staff. Should it be professional admin, hiring junior versus senior staff? And the recommendation, at least I heard, that perhaps increase in staffing level may be appropriate, but perhaps incrementally over several years or time. And that at the meeting that the fiscal committee recommended this proposed budget as well as work plan. So in conclusion, just getting back to the fundamentals, remains unchanged in terms of the proposed pump charge. We do have a healthy fund balance to support proposed staffing and the vast majority of the work plan and tasks. We do insufficient capacity for some of the work tasks, as I've outlined. The staff vacancy and realignment perhaps provides us an opportunity. And so today, this is we're looking for board direction on versions of these documents with our intent to come back to your board at the May meeting for final adoption of both the budget and the work plan. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Dave.
I think Gerhard's report summarizes very well kind of what we discussed in our fiscal committee, but essentially to summarize once again, the discussion as I understood it, and you correct me if you have a different understanding, Chair Mulhart, but there was concern that the agency seems to spend an inordinate amount of time, particularly in professional capacities, geologists and engineers and what sort of tracking down non-reporters and that it seemed like the skills of those individuals should be used more appropriately for the duties of basic specific planning and water supply projects. And so there was a desire to see that in terms of staffing increase. I thought there should be a concept of perhaps shifting duties about so that we've got the appropriate people working on the appropriate types of activities. Is that fairly okay? If anybody has any questions of me, that'd be...
Yeah, just to expand on it, I think if you go back through, our history, we have brought individuals on that have had a high capacity for technical analysis, and we have that on staff now. We've had that in the past, and sometimes we get bogged down in the minutia of the administrative process and chasing the reporting process and the like. And my fear is, if you look at some of our history, we've lost really good technical people that got frustrated because they weren't using the skill set that they had and have moved on to others. And if we keep reproducing that model, we're going to reproduce the same problem again. And so we did have that discussion. And, and Kathy's case and in Rick's case, in your case, it may be, in my opinion, I don't know if we went to this extent, but it may be false economy that if we do the model based on full-time equivalent units or body count, without actually recognizing that if you have an individual that fills a body count quota, but we're underutilizing their skill set, and in fact we disappoint them in career and job expectations, and they leave, and we replace them again, and we do it again, what have we really gained in the process? And it goes to your comment earlier about what are we doing to help LPUG, OPUG, GREAT, and all these other projects move forward? Well, one of the things we should be doing, and we are doing it, is the technical side of doing the analysis so that we can solve some of these very technical problems. When we assign that task, and that task doesn't get done because we have a priority of going out and finding 105 non-reporters and trying to track down where they are in the system, it's just not good use of the skill set we have. So part of our discussion, and Dave will correct me if I'm wrong, my sense was that I'm not opposed to increasing the staffing numbers. I'm not hung up on the 5.55 full-time units, and that it may be false economy not to in fact hire one additional person, maybe two, but to hire them at the right level for the job of tracking down some of the minutia to allow folks at the higher level to get things done. If at the end of the day you're moving the technical side down the road, which is really what our mission should be in a lot of areas, and at the same time getting the clerical stuff done, which is the frustration side of the business we're in, it may be that to the public they see, oh gosh, you just increased from 5.55 full-time units to 7.55 full-time units. It may be false economy to live with a model that in fact has in the past created turnover and hasn't solved some of the other problems we have. So that was part of our discussion. Now, and I'll let Dave speak to his position, but as I understood Dave's position, we don't have to do that all tomorrow. And I agree with that. What we have is a vacancy. And in the past, what we've done is we've gone out and just filled that vacancy with a duplicate of what we had before. And I think the fiscal committee challenged ourselves, we're going to challenge the board and staff to replace that individual with the right individual that will release Rick and Gerhardt and Kathleen to do the things that they were technically trained to do. So it may be in the process of doing that, that 5.55 full-time position may change to some other number. And my position is I'm okay with that, because I think the previous model that I've observed over the years of somewhat a revolving door in some ways, that model is not working, and we might have to change that. Is that a fair summation of what
That's
you heard?
fairly stated. And I would, in a previous informational item, we heard that, we're getting to a point now in chasing down some of the non-reporters where there's no return on that investment. We're spending more than we're anticipating to collect. Nevertheless, as an agency that's mandated to enforce its ordinances, we have to continue on the path. And so I think we have to decide what's the best, most efficient path to get that done, and let's get it done.
And I think it's fair to say that at the committee meeting, we didn't have the answer to what that staffing number should be and what that staffing individual should look like. And staff is looking through that, and it'll come before one of the committees in the future. But as a heads up to everybody, as a statement to everybody, in my personal opinion, I don't feel totally locked in to the 5.55 number. And if when we come back on this issue, staff comes back and says, hey, I think this is how we can do it. We can release Rick's time and Kathleen's time and Gerhardt's time not to be chasing certain things that are not productive and do more productive work. But to do that, we need to bring in 1.5 equivalent people, and we're going to change the model. I'm okay with that. We'll have to justify it, but I'm okay with that. Just to let you know that those are the things we're thinking about. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know, maybe I dozed off or missed it somehow, but you're talking 5.55, and in here it's talking 3.55. Are there
then
two
I'm
more
wrong.
people we're talking
I
about
think Chair
bringing
was
on?
being theoretical there.
Yeah, okay.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
wrong.
Okay,
I didn't have my glasses
I've been
on.
sitting here trying to find where the two people are going to be working.
Okay, take my 5.55 and make it 3.55.
Okay.
You may see a change at some point in the
Okay.
future, a recommendation to change off of 3.55 for the reasons I've talked about.
Okay.
Thank you.
I got it. I
Okay.
just,
2.0 is a better number.
Well, I think that's a debate. I think that's a debate we ought to have, and that's why we're telling you out, sharing with you some of the discussion we had at the fiscal committee meeting about some of these issues. So we did, if I recall, the recommendation up there is correct, for consideration and adoption at the May 22nd meeting. We did agree to that, and we did assign staff a task to look at how to fill this vacancy, and that's why you're seeing different names for the reasons I talked about. Questions?
I would offer this. Number one, I appreciate the recommendation from the committee. I particularly appreciate the idea of identifying staff, because we really do have two separate functions. We've got these water functions and we've got these administrative functions, and as Dave pointed out, we're maybe even spending more money, but the bottom line is a little bit like the IRS. If you don't make it clear you're going to go after everybody, then all of a sudden your compliance rates drop down and everything else. So it's an investment in the future, even if it's not. And if having the right people who can do that, get after all these administrative things, that ultimately keeps the agency stronger and better able to do its mission. The second thing I would like to point out is, the mission of this agency is essentially the wise regulation use of the most important natural resource in Ventura County. And when you think about the most important natural resource in Ventura County, this is not an excessive budget to do that. And if there's some change of your suggestion of a different number of employees, that works if they're matched up well. I would certainly be supportive of that. And the third thing I just would like to point out, in the long run, not necessarily for this budget, because I think it's still a question, but in the long run, if in fact we're not asking the Las Posas Basin User Group to address those big district-wide hard issues, that means we're going to have to address them. We're going to need the budget and the staff to be able to do that. Quite frankly, the way I remembered it, because I was trying to push us to address those, I felt like years ago I was told, no, let's not do it at the district basis. Let's not address this. Let's let the Las Posas User Basin do that, because they'll be able to do it on a more intimate level. So it's just I'm not disagreeing where it should happen, but it's just that's how it was presented. I believe, to me, we didn't go after those things. We didn't budget for those things. We didn't send staff down that road, because we were waiting for the Las Posas Group. Now I'm hearing some people saying maybe they shouldn't do that. I'm not ready to saw off on that. I think Las Posas can still address those things, and they've been after it, and hopefully they will. But to the extent that they don't, we will have to. We won't be able to wait much longer on those issues, and that will take a budget. So I just want to get that out there, not a change here. My first two comments are supportive of where you two gentlemen are suggesting, and the committee is suggesting that we go. But that third one is one that it's just something that I see looming down there for us to consider. Thank you.
Okay. Mike, anything? Charlotte?
I'm fine.
Okay. Anybody in the audience? The recommendation, anybody? Okay. The recommendation is to direct staff to schedule a board review and adoption of the fiscal year 2013-2014 annual work plan final budget during the May 22nd board meeting. That's what the recommendation is. Do I have a motion
Yes.
to that?
I think that's fine. I'll move that because that's a couple months ahead of where, or maybe more than a couple months ahead of where we did it last year and the year before.
Well, they're assuming we'll get it done that day, but okay.
Second that
We're
motion.
gonna.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. All right, let's-
I just have one question. Does staff have the direction they need to put this budget together now?
We do.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you
Let's
very
go to item number 6.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mulhart and directors. For the record, my name is Kathleen Rydell. I'm here to present item 6, the agency annual report for calendar year 2012. Can I have the presentation on the screen?
Chair, if I might interrupt.
Yeah.
In the interest of expediency, we received a very nice copy of the report in our packet. Unless
Okay.
anyone is in disagreement, perhaps we can forego the presentation.
Okay. Let me ask, do members get a chance to see this, if they're comfortable with that? Kathleen, let me stop you for a second. Anybody in the audience have any questions on the report that was sent in? This is the one you're referring to, right?
Yes.
Yes, all right. I don't see anybody having any questions. So, yes, sir, you have a question. You have to come up and put your name in the record. If you don't want to, you don't have, but if you want to speak, yes, you can get a copy.
I just have one question. Is there anything in particular outside of the written report that was submitted? Is there anything either outside of or in the written report that the staff particularly wants to call to our attention in this public setting?
There is one slide I'd like to present that is not
Okay.
in the
All right,
packet.
show us the one slide, yes.
It's not working. There we go. I did compare the total allocation available in the, for the calendar year 2012, AHA and its adjusted historical allocation and plus baseline, compared it to the total reported extractions, that's 125,404. And then I displayed there how much is baseline plus adjusted historical allocation that's shown in blue. Green are the irrigation efficiency filings. The darker green is those operators that in their accounts they had AHA and baseline, and so that would account for roughly 51% of the irrigation efficiency water that was extracted and used. And then the light green is the irrigation efficiency water extracted for which the operators had no AHA or baseline. It's just the total volume of water. The credits redeemed are displayed here. It's 12,134,000 acre feet, or 12,134 acre feet. And then the surcharge that's shown there, the overpumping, that may be decreased. Those are filers that presented their, turned in their statements, but may in the future file irrigation efficiency, but at the time did not file irrigation efficiency.
Okay, all right, very good.
So,
Anybody? All right, very good. Anybody have any questions? All right.
So I'm reading this right. We're 4,100 acre feet over
the adjusted historic allocation and baseline that was
Okay.
available in 2012.
But remind your board, that's 25,000 over what the 2007 groundwater management plan says the safe yield is. So the point of the slide is that between the adjusted historical allocation plus the baseline allocation that's allowed by the ordinance, we're still over the 100,000. And I know that it's just one size fits all. The basin-specific plan is supposed to get at that, but it's just a reminder of where we are.
Okay.
Well, and then also to point out that the 12,000 acre feet there is redeemed credits, which we've been told over and over again is not real water.
Yeah, that's problematic
So, I
right
mean,
there.
It's part of the 25,000.
Well, it's added into the accounting naturally. That makes sense, but it's not actual water pumped.
All right. Can I have a motion to accept the agency annual report?
Receive and file. Is that
Second?
what we're supposed to do?
Second.
All right, motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. Let's go to item number 7. All right, let's, all right, there's two, let's see if we can simplify this as well. On item number 7, A and B, let's see if I can find it. As I understand it, the Operations Committee back in November and back in February went through and looked at some of these language cleanup issues. And on page 3 of 7A, you have a list of the key ordinance code changes, definitions, sections 2.4, 2.5, and thusly. And as I read through the read out line and followed the logic that you see, a lot of the red is updating some of the numbering and the like. I saw where the due date was changed and some others were changed and things were struck out. So I see where you've made these changes. So let me turn to the Operations Committee. And Mike, give me some guidance. How much of a presentation does Rick need to make?
Very minimal. The only one, and Director Bennett was a participant in the meeting, but did you have a chance to, in your mind, approve this?
I've had a chance.
And you're satisfied with it as presented?
Very comfortable with it,
yeah. I think, therefore, Chairman, it satisfies both of our requests.
Okay. So from our process of the committee process, I'm hearing from both committee members, you're okay with the changes that are presented and the strikeouts that are made. It meets what you guys talked about. Okay.
And I appreciate the checking since I wasn't at the one meeting. So
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So we're okay on that. So to get us through this, first of all, before I move on to the administrative process of moving us through it, does anybody in the audience have any questions that they see in the recommended changes that the Operations Committee has recommended? Okay, I see none. All right. So first of all, let's go down here. So rather than hearing a presentation, we've essentially solved that because we've gotten the feedback from the folks that were tasked with going through it. We need to do a couple things. We need to find Ordinance 8.7 to be categorically exempt from the CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act guidelines. And then,
So moved.
Okay, so Al, we do each of these separately, or can we do all these in one big motion?
You can do either way.
Okay, so we'll need so hold on, Charlotte. We'll need to find that the ordinance 8.7 to be categorically exempt. We'll conduct a first reading in title only, and we'll schedule a public notice at the next regular board meeting for May 22nd to consider adoption of ordinance 8.7.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Any comments? Because this is a proposed ordinance change, let's do this as a roll call, please.
Don't we need the title read?
Do you have to do the title read first before we take the vote? Yes. Okay, if you would, please.
Ordinance number 8.7, an ordinance to amend the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency Ordinance Code.
Okay, so let's now do it as, Mike, you had something you can say? No. Let's do it as a roll call, please.
Chair Mulhart?
Yes.
Director Craven?
Yes.
Director Bennett?
Yes.
Director Kelly?
Yes.
Director Borchard?
Yes.
Okay, the next item is item 7B. It's, yes, sir.
Third recommendation, maybe I missed it. Schedule a notice public hearing.
That was part
Yes,
of the motion?
that was part of the motion.
I'm sorry, I missed
Yes.
it.
Okay, let's go to item B, incorporating civil penalties. Again, this was run by the Operations Committee. You guys want to give your recommendation? Mike?
You have to have something in your gun if you're going to shoot it.
What the doctor means to say is that he's deeply honored to have. Isn't that how they do it in Congress, right? You're my esteemed colleague from, it reminds me of a tape I heard when I was in Vietnam about interviewing a fighter pilot with the news media, and the news guys would say, after the fighter pilot told his story, what the captain means to say. Anyway, all right, so what we have is, anybody in the audience have any questions on what the Operations Committee recommendation was? Hearing none. All right. This one here is discuss proposed resolution 13.1 in relationship to proposed resolution 8.7 and provide feedback to staff. Are we adopting it or are we just giving?
Just discuss it at your full board level to make sure that we're on the right track with it.
Okay. And what we're essentially saying is the Operations Committee did review it, and they're comfortable with staff's recommendations and the changes. Is that what I'm hearing? Yes. All right. Does any members have any problems with that general criteria and the specific criteria and the recommendations? I'm hearing no objections to that. So the recommendation to staff is to adopt the proposed resolution, and I guess that would be at a future board meeting you'd put on the agenda.
That's correct.
Okay? Everybody okay with that as a recommendation? All right. There's your feedback.
Thank you.
Okay. We're now to Executive Officer Report, Administrative Report. Motion?
Move to receive and file.
Just a reminder, Chair Muller, meeting of the Executive Committee on May 7th.
Yes.
2 to 4, just for everybody in the audience.
2 to 4. Executive. Okay. All right. I had a motion to receive and a second, please.
Second.
And a second. Any objection? Hearing no objection, it's so moved. All right. We're going to adjourn to closed session to deal with some. Do I have to read this, Al? No. We're going to adjourn to closed session, and do you suspect there'll be any action following that meeting?
I do not anticipate any report out of closed session.
Okay. So we'll adjourn to closed session. All right. Thank you.